Hello, Programming 12. We're going to be starting the Asteroids project with a discussion on p-vectors. This video will mostly be looking at like how they work, just like the code, how to set them up, how to use them. And then we will possibly in another video, the next one, we'll talk about some of the advantages they give us. Because right now it'll kind of look a bit like it's just extra work. For not much extra work, a little bit less work in some cases. But the real value of why we're going to do it is going to be revealed soon. So do stay tuned. So we'll just take a look at this example project here, which is a classic type of thing you would use. Vectors 4. Right now, it's, you guessed it, it's the clicker game. This is a very basic clicker game. And there's I can't even click on the target. There's no clicking. It's really just a circle bouncing. Love it. And we're going to take a look at how we can replace the x and y and vx and vy with vectors, and hopefully have some fun with this in the meantime. So here we go. So x and y, vx and vy, there's a lot of sort of quantities that come together in pairs, right? You need an x and a y to describe position. You need a vx and a vy to describe velocity. And so this is a perfect example of where vectors come in handy. So I'm going to show you what a vector looks like, and we're going to replace these components with vectors instead of just plain old floats or ints or whatever we're using. So I'm going to go over here. Here's where we have this information. I'm going to keep the D there, but I'm going to put in replacements. I'll leave these coded in here so that our code doesn't break as we go, but I think it'll be nice to see how to do it. So here's a p-vector. So I can make a p-vector, and it's going to combine like x and y. So I'm going to call it location. And I will also make a p-vector for vx and vy, and that's going to be velocity. I can never decide if I want to call them location and velocity, or if I want to call them like location, lock, and vel, because like this is a lot more convenient to program. So I'm gonna leave it up to you to decide. And you know what? I'll go with the short one. Don't forget you can always rename variables later. You can go rename, and it'll rename them everywhere. Okay, so there, I've made two vectors. Now here's one thing that's different. These are objects. They are not floats, they're not just numbers, so we have to instantiate them with the new keyword. Okay, so I'll go down here. So normally I just give x a value, but before we do that, we gotta instantiate vectors. So in the same vein as doing this bit of code, I'm gonna be doing this instead. I'm gonna say location equals new p vector, and then I can give it this information. So this would be the x component, and this would be the y component. It just goes in order. So, this one line of code is roughly equivalent to this line of code. We're not really saving ourselves any typing, but that's not really the value of it. I'm just showing you how to translate this into p-vectors. Okay, so I've done that. How about vx and vy? Hey, same story. Right now it's random, and we'll just live with that. We'll just go with it, but this is, spoiler alert, this is where some of the advantages of p-vectors are going to come in. But we'll just, we'll just just do what we've done in the past for now. So this is calling the constructor. This will be my x component, and it's the same for the y component. That'll kind of give us a random direction, I guess. Okay, so these ones are now gone. We're not going to use them anymore, so I'll just comment them out and keep them in the background. Okay, so next, we now have to use this in the actual target itself. So instead of drawing a circle x and y, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in location.x. Now you might wonder, where did that x come from? Well, that's how p-vectors work. You can get their different components, the x component and the y component, by giving the name of the p-vector, a dot, and then x. That just gives us the first number. In this case, if it hasn't changed yet, it's going to be width divided by 2. And then the dot y will give us height divided by 2, because that's just where we started. So we replace these with location.y. And that's why I went with lock, because like it gets pretty wordy. Although I kind of like it other way. I don't know. I can't decide. I'll leave you to decide. Now, how about this? How do we add? So now you might be like, oh, well, I think I could just do this. Dot this, and then velocity dot x, and this would work. This is correct. You could do this. And you could do it for the y as well. But it turns out velocity is a vector, and you can just add them together. That'll do this kind of thing. It'll add the x and y components automatically. And watch, you can do location dot add velocity. So you can turn those two lines of code into this one. And it's doing the same job. Don't get confused or mixed up. This line of code is really just x equals x plus vx, y equals y plus vy. We're just adding the velocity to our location to move the target in the direction that it's supposed to be facing. All right, that's it so far. So now we know that vectors can add. Could you add to velocity? You sure could, and we'll take a look at that later. Now here's our bouncing code. Love the bouncing code, right? We've been doing it for a long time. So how do we change it? Well, you can just really just put in the lock.y and then, velocity.y. You can still manually manipulate the y and x components for doing things like bouncing. It's not really different. Okay, so I'll just put those in, and you can see really that it's not that different. Oh, this is actually .x. Yeah, that's right. So it's a little wordier, but not terrible. Okay, so shall we see if this works? I'm gonna finish it off just by commenting out these. I'll just delete them all together. Boom, gone. I'll leave the D there. Yeah, I think we're ready to go. So let's see if it still works the same. So we'll go ahead and play. Sure enough, our target is moving. It's bouncing. Awesome. So that's a basic translation of vectors, from the type of x, y, vx, vy things we've been doing. So in the next video, we'll take a look at some of the advantages of vectors and why we're bothering to go through this. Okay, thanks everybody.